Now, it always seems like after a prolonged sojourn into the later generations, you guys want to make a return to Generation 1. For comfort, I guess? Yeah, I can understand that. We all need to go home sometimes. Knowing you guys, this is just a brief break before we end up going on another 3-week-long expedition with a legendary trio or Gen 4 starters or something. So let's go back to a familiar Gen 1 Pokemon for now, Clefable. Did you guys know that Clefairy was actually supposed to be the mascot of the franchise instead of Pikachu? It was even going to be Ash's original Pokemon in the anime, but they changed that last minute. The first Pokemon manga actually featured a really rude Clefairy as Red's first Pokemon. Holy yikes, look at that face. God, that's terrifying. These days, Clefairy seems to have calmed down a bit and mostly makes its dough teaching memory games instead of making children cry, which for me is a very good change. But maybe that horrifying power carried over into battle? Let's find out. How good was Clefable actually? And in this video, we'll be talking about these competitive formats. We all know that Clefairy's signature move is Metronome, but as it turns out, it ended up learning half of the moves in the game anyways, so having Metronome was sort of a moot point. Seriously, Clefable's move pool has always been gigantic, one of the original unpredictable normal types that have become a hallmark of the type. Now, if only its stats weren't so mediocre to go along with it. Clefable's biggest problem was being outclassed by Chansey, a similarly gifted normal type. If you were looking for a utility-based special attacker, Chansey was your bet. You can learn a lot just from comparing these two move pools. Chansey gets every single move that Clefable does, plus 2 more. Egg Bomb and Soft Boil, the key to its longevity. It's really pretty shameful on Game Freak's part. How was Clefable supposed to stand out at all like that? It's just a worse pink normal type. Clefable's only chance of standing out was to double down on its ability to use its normal typing effectively, something Chansey was atrociously bad at due to its bad physical stats. Normal was a great attacking type in Gen 1 because of its good matchups against psychic types, and the added benefit of Body Slam's paralysis. Clefable's standard attacking stat was basically a laundry list of some of the best moves in the game. Blizzard, Body Slam, Hyper Beam, and Thunderbolt or Thunderwave. Clefable admittedly wasn't going to be taking many names with its 70 attack, but this set could be effective at multiple things. If you wanted to take advantage of its ability to spread all 3 common statuses, you could also swap out the normal moves for Sing and Thunderwave as standards, or even counter to deal with other Body Slams. Clefable could pull this role off a little better than Chansey, despite the latter sharing the exact same moves because of its better physical bulk. Otherwise, Clefable could attempt to be unpredictable with its odd screens, mimic, or submission against opposing normal types, but it was really an underwhelming Pokemon, and with no chance of making overused. Makes you sort of happy that they didn't choose it as the mascot. Although if we're honest, Pikachu and Raichu weren't exactly hot shakes without some Game Freak tomfoolery either. Clefable's biggest counter was Gengar, but anything with high special and decent defense would also shrug off its relatively weak attacks, making Snorlax and the legendary some particularly effective answers. Luckily for Clefable, the special split was enough to differentiate it from Chansey, as the Eggmon no longer had straight up better special stats. That wasn't all Gen 2 brought though. Clefable also got some upgrades, so it wasn't just the Roy to Chansey's Marth anymore. Those buffs took the form of more moves. Return and Moonlight were just some of the options it got. Clefable still had the option of running a mixed set that used these 2 moves. With no EVs in Gen 2, mixed sets were pretty viable, and this is where Clefable's utility came into play. Switching into a Return, Double Edge, Fire Blast, and Thunderbolt or Ice Beam was always scary, even if it wasn't going to be packing all those moves. But the mixed set was successful because of the fear instilled by Clefable's main set, Belly Drum. With Belly Drum, Clefable's mediocre attack was suddenly terrifying. What's more, it had the proper tools to set up for itself. Moonlight, of course, provided recovery for the hit you would be taking and granted it longevity. And it had its choice of Charm, Encore, Fire Blast, or Shadow Ball in the last slot. Charm and Encore could take advantage of physical attackers or curse users to let Clefable set up, while Fire Blast and Shadow Ball represented the choice of beating Steel types or Ghost types. These 2 types represented some of the strongest effective counters to Clefable, especially the Belly Drum set. If you knew which coverage move it had, you could effectively tank it out, especially as a Ghost type. Other than that, the premier phaser Suicune could deal with it by tanking, a return, and phasing, but would take a heavy hit to its health. Rock type phasers also did well, and if anything had Encore, Clefable was dead meat. The final sticking point is that Clefable is pretty slow. Even if it got set up, it was vulnerable to getting hit first and being taken out, so proper paralysis support was often key to its sweep. The strict conditions for setting up Belly Drum meant that Clefable didn't dominate Gen 2 by any means. but it was strong enough to find itself banned from underuse, a definite improvement from the past gen. Clefable only continued to expand its already stellar move pool to Galactic Breath going into Gen 3. Calm Mind, Soft Boiled, Focus Punch, and Cosmic Power were all extremely strong options that made Clefable's multiple sets more viable. Belly Drum played virtually the same as the last generation, except that Clefable no longer had the luxury of running a mix set with it, so it had to resort to Meteor Mash or a utility move to fill in gaps. Calm Mind made use of the tried and true Bolt Beam combination to be decent, if not great, and Clefable could even attempt its old mixed attacking shenanigans credit of Sub Punch alongside its gargantuan special coverage. Clefable was able to spec any way it wanted that it could run a set dedicated to whatever moves it wanted. Counter was a viable option along with Soft Boiled and Shadow Ball to hit ghost types, and you could even attempt to stall out the opponent with Cosmic Power, Rest, and either Encore or Toxic. In a way, Gen 3 feels like the most accurate representation of what Clefable was supposed to be all along, a customizable Pokemon. Almost like the main character of an RPG whose stat specs you get to choose. Run an Encore set that beats Sweepers, run Psych Up just to beat Suicune, hell run Choice Band if you really feel like it. Charm, Dual Screens, Safeguard, Sing, Wish, Psychic, Fire Blast, Clefable's move pool is one of the biggest in the game. As such, it's a Pokemon that is impossible to counter as soon as you see it, and any would-be opposition could fall prey to Clefable springing an unexpected move on them. Swampert as a tanky Pokemon who had utility and power beat most sets, but defensive variants could beat it, and there was always a chance that you had a Magical Leaf or Hidden Power Grass hidden away to deal with it. The main way to deal with Clefable was by figuring out its set and reacting accordingly. If it's a Belly Drum user, switch in a Steel type or a Ghost type, or just a strong physical tank who didn't care that much about Clefable's bad attack stat. If it was a set reliant on setting up repeatedly, go for Taunt, Gyarados, or Jirachi. Then again, what if it had Thunderbolt or Fire Blast? The safest bet was frequently just to punch it. No really, use a fighting type. In the end, it didn't really matter that much because Clefable's stats just aren't that great, unlike an RPG protagonist. It ended up being pretty lackluster in the end, so as long as you didn't lose outright to the element of surprise, you could just beat out Clefable in the end. As a result, it ended up in underuse, but in a generation that introduced a literal chameleon Pokemon, it was Clefable who was the most capable of shifting to any environment. Gen 4 introduced Magic Guard as Clefable's signature ability, making it completely immune to indirect damage. That single ability made Clefable any team's worst nightmare. Clefable's strongest answer to stall was defensive Calm Mind, which systematically took apart stall teams because it was immune to entry hazards and toxics, and could spend its time setting up to power through the typically bulky stall Pokemon. This set failed horribly as a normal sweeper though, so don't get it twisted. If Clefable really wanted to, it could also run stall itself, using the same ability as its way in. Resistance to residual damage meant Clefable couldn't be dispatched with toxic like other walls, making it an extremely frustrating stall Pokemon to deal with. What Clefable could do to set itself apart was invest in special attack or Encore, two things Chansey was lacking. Clefable could muster a good supporting set with Thunder Wave, Wish, or Heal Bell, while still maintaining a good attacking presence due to Ice Beam's coverage. Calm Mind was still an option on attack, boosted even more in power by Life Orb. This iteration was particularly great. Magic Guard negated any Life Orb recoil, making it an extremely powerful choice on attacking sets. The same held true for Clefable's weird Wall Breaker set, which made use of Life Orb's boosting power and Clefable's huge move pool to attack from both sides. So all that sounds great once again. Clefable's versatility is off the charts and it looks like sky's the limit, but the limit is actually enforced by the stat line. With not a single stat reaching base 100, Clefable just couldn't cut it anymore in overuse, even with its unpredictable nature. You can throw a million different things at a Heatran, but if none of them are doing anything, what's the point? This power creep was also why the Belly Drum set fell out of vogue as well. Clefable truly entered Jack of all trades, master of none status here, and that's not a great look in Pokemon. While it had been close to breaking through the last two generations, Gen 4 saw it decidedly in underuse. Unfortunately for Clefable, what was its signature ability was snatched out from underneath it in Gen 5 by Reuniclus and Sigilyph, removing any hope it had to ride that wave into overuse. But don't get me wrong, Clefable was still an incredible Magic Guard user, but it just wasn't the best one. It also got another ability in Underwear, which you might remember from our Quagsire video as allowing it to ignore enemy stat boosts, which we're not gonna talk about right now, but keep that in mind. While every other generation came with a new tool for Clefable, Gen 5 gave it only the new Wish mechanics, making it a more effective cleric because of its decent base HP. But what about being a poor man's Chansey? Well, Chansey was banned from underuse because of how good it was with Eviolite, leaving Clefable a decent room as a bulky support normal type. Other than that, she could still run Life Orb, but the power creep meant finding time to set up with Calm Mind or Belly Drum was harder than ever. Clefable actually had access to the same Magic Guard plus Stored Power plus Cosmic Power combo that could make Sigilyph such a terror, but it was just too slow and weak to pull it off. Gen 5 marked the absolute low point for Clefable. Clefable, especially with the Volt Turn combo allowing enemies to scout it more effectively and figure out what it was up to. Running out of tricks up its sleeve, Clefable fell to rarely use, where it effectively managed to be the same finger-waving, chaos-causing mess it always had, but just in the low tiers. And it's so funny how much just a few changes can drastically alter a Pokemon. For Clefable, just 2 alterations made it the top tier Pokemon it had been longing to be for 5 generations. Its new Fairy typing and a 10-point stat buff to its special attack. Mono Fairy was an incredible defensive typing, and Clefable worked that advantage like no other. Its evenly spaced stats finally became useful as its combo of bulk and power let it run an effective Calm Mind set that beat out the majority of the dragon and fighting types in the tier, all while being immune to status. Clefable's good matchups against common anti-hazard Pokemon like Starmie and Latios also meant that it was one of the best independent Stealth Rock setters in the game. Seriously, this Pokemon gets everything. Clefable could operate solo with a mix of utility and Thunder Wave and attacking power and Moonblast, and it even had reliable recovery. Finally, if you wanted to forego helping your team, straight up Life Orb Clefable made for a deceptively powerful tank because of that small boost to its special attack and the move pool we've talked about so much. But those are just the Magic Guard sets. Now we have to talk about Unaware too. The prevalence of boosting Pokemon in Gen 6 made Unaware an incredible ability, allowing Clefable to effectively wall out Pokemon that otherwise would pose huge problems, like Mega Pinsir and Mega Lopunny. It couldn't just stay in against these sweepers forever, as it would eventually fall prey to its middling bulk. But it was an effective stopgap. Unaware could even be run aside Calm Mind, although it usually necessitated losing the Life Orb for our leftovers, making Clefable's easy switches on such Pokemon suddenly an opportunity for it to set up and threaten the opponents. As always, any coverage moves posted here are just suggestions, cause Clefable could do whatever it wanted. That's the key to using it, really. Find what it needs to do on your team and tailor it to that. If there's a weird gap on your team, there's a moderately high chance it could be Clefable shaped. Clefable's Fairy typing did, however, make the answers to checking it a bit more clear. This is a byproduct of a good thing in disguise. Clefable had a more defined role as a Fairy special tank, so of course its counters would be more defined as well. Fire types like Talonflame and Heatran would easily eat Moonblast and threaten it hard in return. Poison types, of course, became the go-to for any person looking to take some Fairy magic out of the opponent's lineup, making Gengar a consistent counter for every generation. And finally, Clefable still struggled mightily against Steel types. It actually did worse, honestly. Before, it could usually threaten with Fire Blast and be comfortable knowing that the Steel type would have to hit it twice, but its new weaknesses to Steel made it harder for Clefable to deal with. Finally, Stall Breakers with Taunt made use of the fact that all Clefable sets relied on setting up, whether it was Calm Mind or a support move. Gliscor fit this role the best. Clefable was actually one of the most used Pokemon in the game in XY, but Oras dimmed its light a little bit. The introduction of Mega Metagross, as well as a boost in uses from many of its problem matchups like Gliscor, Scizor, Talonflame, and Jirachi, made its life harder, but not too hard, as it thrived in overuse for all of Gen 6. The Fairy typing that gave Clefable its big break in Gen 6 also allowed it to make waves in VGC. Clefable had Follow Me for years, and what do you expect, this thing has almost every move known to man. But the Fairy typing is what allowed it to thrive effectively. In a metagame filled with Draco Meteors, Clefable's ability to not only redirect moves away from its opponent, but also frequently become completely immune to them was incredibly useful. This is also where Unaware came into play, as Clefable didn't give a damn about Power Up Punch Kangaskhan or Belly Drum Azumarill. Call this Clefable Enable. With its support, powerful Mega Pokemon on its own side didn't have to fear potentially disastrous attacks. The Mega Pokemon usually benefiting was Salamence, who had amazing synergy with Clefable. Scared of the Dragon type attacks Clefable ate up. 3 out of the 4 Clefable moves were almost locked in: Follow Me, Protect, Helping Hand, and the last move went to Moonblast or Ice Beam, depending on whether you wanted to hit Salamence or other Dragon types harder. Multiple players saw great success with Clefable during the 2015 season, including Henry M's first place at Oregon Regionals, Jake Underwood's 8th place at Florida, and Lightcore's top 8 in Lancaster. But the 2 most successful Clefable sets actually had a slight change. In place of Helping Hand, they opted for Minimize. Aaron Traylor managed to take Minimize Clefable all the way to win at St. Louis Regionals, although he said afterwards he really wished he brought Icy Wind instead. Kevin Reed took the innovation a step further by taking a Minimize Clefable with Magic Guard, named after the band Alice in Chains, to 20th at Nats, using the old signature ability to take Will-O-Wisp for Salamence, and he thought Minimize worked great. But Clefable wasn't the only member of the Clef family showing up in VGC. Clefairy actually made quite a big impact in VGC as well because of the rare ability Friend Guard, which reduces all damage to partner Pokemon by 25%. Since Clefable wasn't really focused on doing that much damage, a lot of people saw this as a benefit for the turns you weren't using Follow Me, and Clefairy managed to find quite a lot of success, actually edging out Clefable as the preferred Pokemon on a lot of teams. James Bake took it ensued second at Madison Regionals. David Mancuso made second in Florida, and Jackson Famous Death Lakey made top 4 at Melbourne Regionals. However, only one Clefairy showed up at the famously chalk overrun Worlds of 2015, and the user didn't do particularly great. Post-Worlds, many players including Bake switched to Clefable instead because of Unaware to counter the Mega Kangaskhan resurgence and emergence of Azumarill. It just goes to show how much of a metagame can shift in just a year if you give it time to marinate. Clefairy made small appearances in 2016, but found itself overwhelmed by the legendary Pokemon that dominated the format. It's a shame neither of them were allowed in 2014 because it was Kalos decks only. With all the Hydreigon spam going on, it would have been perfect for the meta. And that's it. So how good was Clefable actually? For once, we have a Pokemon that's dramatically shifted in use its whole life. It started out as a poor Chansey clone, then found its defining aspect through refusing to be defined at all, which of course ended it up in the dumps, but in recent years, its status as the most well-rounded fairy type has garnered a strong placement, especially with its incredible abilities. And for now, the future of Clefable looks bright. Thanks for watching, everyone, and as always, if you liked the video and you want to see more, be sure to subscribe to False Swipe Gaming for more weekly Pokemon content, and of course, as I always say, comment on what Pokemon you want to see next. Also, thank you so much to our patrons for continued support of our videos, and thank you to everyone else watching as well. And follow my crew on these social media platforms, yada yada yada. And that's all I got. See you next time, everyone.